You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 37. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. Today's episode starts differently than most. My guest, client, and friend, Jamia Ponder, is joining me today, and our intention was to talk about rediscovering yourself after motherhood and what it means to stand beside your husband during this journey of life and marriage. We'll eventually get to that in the interview, but as we greeted each other and said hello, our conversation quickly turned to what the entire world is talking about right now: racism. Our talk was so impactful to me that I decided to just hit the record button and start. Jamia will introduce herself eventually in the episode, but we dive right into what we are both telling our young sons right now and how we want them to grow up protecting each other. You're also going to hear about what I asked Jamia before I hit record in regards to my own content. In all honesty, I had questioned whether I should talk about racism outside of some Instagram posts, but Jamia gave me some insight that I hadn't been privy to before. She encouraged me to share with you what my stance and beliefs are in the hopes that it will possibly help someone in their journey to becoming a white ally and how we can all do better. Last week, I wrote an Instagram post in which I admitted it took me a lot of time and deep soul searching and thinking to recognize that not always being outspoken during certain times out of fear of causing an uncomfortable situation, I had been racist. I take my actions very seriously and promise to myself, to you, and to my family that I will never remain silent again. I am teaching and will continue to teach my children that yes, we may be different colors on the outside, but we are all human beings who deserve respect, love, and decency, and it is up to us to stand up for that. I am teaching them that unfortunately the world is not filled with the same beliefs, but it is up to us to speak up to let others know that isn't right. Jamia pointed out to me that racism is a learned behavior. I believe that if you learned it, you can unlearn it. Just as you can learn to run a marathon, you can learn to understand that Black Lives Matter and what you need to do to be the change the world needs. I will share some resources with you and continue to be transparent on what my journey looks like, and I want to be a listening ear for you on your journey. I'm beyond grateful that Jamia joined me in this conversation because it's one that I'm so thankful for and blessed to have had. I know that once you hear from Jamia, you are going to want her in your life just as I have her in mine. So what I wanted to say was that, my kids, so the kids are 4 and 5, and I know that I've read, you shouldn't see color, you should see color, and you should be teaching your children to see color. But at the same time, the age of 5 is when they can become racist. And right now, my 5-year-old son, whether or not he sees color, he talks about people in reference to their shirt color.
Right.
So, it's the purple guy down the street. And you're like,
right.
What? And even we've watched basketball games where he goes, the black guy. And my husband and I look at each other, we're like, where would he come up with saying something like that? That's not how we talk. And he's like, they all have black jerseys on. That one.
Right.
And we're like, oh, okay. We understand that now. And I'm glad because he has friends of all different races and colors and boys and girls. And, there's no discrimination at all. What he's struggling with right now is that as a little boy, he sees every firefighter, every cop, they're his friends. Right. And we've ingrained in him that, these are your friends. These people help protect you just as we do. And he's seen the video of the officer killing George Floyd. And he said to me, yesterday. It brings tears to my eyes. Mommy, why would my friend do that?
Mm-hmm.
Why would my friend kill this man? Did this man do something that was so wrong that the policeman had to kill him? And I've said, no, absolutely not. And most people who break the law do not do something that deserves for them to be killed.
Right.
And now he's looking at these officers, pushing down a 75-year-old man. And he goes, I don't understand why my friends are being so mean.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle that we're dealing with of, yeah, they're not all good, just as, people do bad things and not everyone is good. And so the issue becomes even bigger, I think.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, to be quite honest, I think it's a great time. These are pivotal ages, where you teach your kids sort of that difference between right and wrong. They start to learn. And even my son, he's 6, right? We never told him that he was Black. He used to say he was brown, right? Like he was brown, like the color crayon brown. And that's how he would look at people. And he did, as a younger boy, sort of refer to people by the color of shirt that they had on. But at some point there was a switch, right? And he realized that he was Black. And I don't think he necessarily sees police officers as bad people, because my father is also in law enforcement. And so he sees Pop Pop and he knows that Pop Pop takes the bad guys to jail, right? So he'll say that kind of thing. But in light of what has happened to George Floyd, he didn't necessarily equate that he sort of saw it as like, that one kid that's in class that's naughty, right? And he makes a bad choice. And so he has to pay for the bad choice that he made. And so that's sort of the correlation that I want him to connect with it. But I also worry, right? Am I dumbing it down too much for him? Because the reality is he is a Black boy that is going to grow into a Black man. And so I grieve a little bit at the thought that one day my sweet, sweet boy when does he go from being sweet and cute to a threat? You know what I mean? And so just having to have those conversations with him, and sort of framing those conversations and having him be the type of child that he is very happy-go-lucky and very oblivious to the world that's sort of going on around him. He's the kid that would skip in the middle of the street, not thinking, that something could happen to him. And so framing those conversations for me and for us is going to look differently for every child that we have. My girls, they know a lot more about what's going on and they can verbalize, hey, that's not right. That's not right. And teaching them to say, that's not right. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like, it's going to look different for every kid. But I think the bigger picture is having those conversations. And I think you're doing the right thing where, that's not all police officers. But the reality is that it can look that way for our friends that are Black and brown, our friends that are that way and that are, persons of color. And so you have to say, for me, it would be teaching him to step up and say something, because in a situation where a Black or brown person's voice is not heard or it's not respected or it's not recognized, your son could be the difference maker in that situation. And so you're doing the right thing, rearing him in a way to recognize that situation is not right. And to say something, hey, that's not right. That's not okay. It's not okay to do that to our friend. These are our friends. And so I think that's the awakening that our country is coming to, where we're stepping up and we're saying, this is not right. That is not right. And it's taking our white allies to step in to say, to make some noise around this thing, because we've been saying it for hundreds of years. But, so the education really does start at home. So I think you're doing the right thing in having those conversations. And if I have to have the hard conversations with my Black girls and boys, then I think it's also on our counterparts to also have those hard conversations at home and really take grips with the reality, however uncomfortable it is, however difficult it may be to explain, to really get in those uncomfortable spaces and have those conversations. So that's sort of
I think one of the hardest parts too is to help him realize or recognize why somebody would even think that way.
Right.
Because even for me, the mentality of, well, your skin color is different from mine, so that makes you bad or less than, it baffles me.
Yeah.
And it always has. I grew up in a very small town, and literally I can count on one hand how many Black people lived in the town. And I remember when I would say it was the first family that came into town, and they were sweeter than pie. They went to the Catholic school that we did, went to church, and someone burned crosses on their front lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, it appalls me because I'm still in touch with this family. The son went to school with my brother. I took exercise classes at the local gym from the mother. And I couldn't comprehend who would do this. Who in our small town thinks that this is right and okay? And God bless them, power to them, because they shoved it off. They stayed there. They continue to live there, even to the point. So I grew up in Paradise that burned down almost 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And as I watched the news, they talked about this woman who had had a stroke. She was home alone, and she found the strength somehow to take her wheelchair, toss it out of her house, crawl down the steps, and start wheeling herself down the street until a firefighter found her and got her. And that was the woman. And to me, I spoke to her son and just said, of course she would. Your mom was such a powerhouse, 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, that why wouldn't she still be, that's just the type of person that she was and is. And it's trying to wrap my head around why anyone would think a human being is any less than them just because their skin color is different.
But I think, again, it goes back to sort of the at-home training. Racism is learned. It is not anything that we are born with. And it is a habit of superiority. And so the only way that you can make a habit of feeling superior is by making someone else feel or appear inferior. So all of that starts at home. It starts by the things that we say to our kids, the types of jokes that we say around them. Oh, look, they probably had fried chicken and watermelon. Those types of things are all things that shape our experience. If you witness an aunt or an uncle being rude to, or making fun of, or making light of someone else's situation, all of those things frame how we come up as children. And so then we become adults that think and behave that way. So it's not so much appalling as it is learned. And somebody has to pass that down. Do you know what I mean? And so it's a systemic issue that keeps passing down generation to generation until somebody finally wakes up and says, what the hell? This is not okay. Like, we cannot do that. And the reality is that person's probably ostracized, or they're made fun of, or made to feel less than, until it becomes a habit. It's just like unlearning any behavior. If you eat very poorly, it's going to take some time for your taste buds to readjust to you eating healthy. Your body's going to hate you. You're going to have a headache or withdrawals or whatever the case may be. Whenever you're detoxing from something that's not good for you, there's always a period of uncomfortable, or a period of detox when you have to kick that stuff out of your system. So to answer your question, it's a learned behavior. And it's something that has been passed down from generation to generation, starting all the way back to slavery. And then just kind of trickling down over the centuries, really. So I think that's basically where we are. But we have, as Black people, have had to be strong. And to hear that lady, that is an incredible story, that she threw her wheelchair out the window and rolled herself. What the heck? Rolled herself up the street. But to think about, and specifically, I'll never forget when I was growing up, my dad was giving me series of life lessons as I matured into becoming a teenager, and he realized, hey, these are the last couple of years I'm going to have with this girl under my roof. I better give her some life lessons. So one thing he taught me about was how to react if I'm ever stopped by the police. And then another thing he told me before I went off to college was as a Black woman, that I was probably, and this is going to sound horrible, but I was probably the lowest on the totem pole in terms of levels of respect, right? So you have your white male, and you have your white female, and you have your Black male, and then you have your Black female. And so he's like, the reality is you'll probably have to work twice as hard and have twice as many credentials to get half the distance. And so if you think about that, and that mentality, and the fact that this woman threw her wheelchair out the doggone window to roll herself up the street, she knew in that moment that she was the only thing that she could rely on. And she had to be strong enough, even in her weakness, she had to be strong enough to fight for herself.
Yeah.
Like that is our life, and we pass that down. My mom passed it down to me, and, I'm passing it down to my daughter in a sense, but I also I'm trying to break that a little bit, not because as a mom, right, Michelle, you're a mom, that a lot of work falls on the mom. A lot of work falls on a woman, period, in a household. I mean, God bless our husbands, but those kids are like right at your heels. I mean, I can't even back up a little bit before I back over a little person in this house. I'm like,
Same.
whoa, you are like right on my heels there. But as a Black woman thinking about, if they have, you have a child, or, you're either with the father, you're not with the father, whatever the case may be, we have been taught that we are our only people that we can pretty much rely on. And so just that level of strength has just continued to be passed down. And so it's like, at some point, is some of this sort of like unhealthy? Like, you want to be independent, but you also want to be able to coexist like in a relationship. So I even struggle with that. Like I handle it all so much so that it's almost a handicap. Like I have almost handicapped my husband where he doesn't have to think about anything. And he knows like the time that he walks out the door, and he could be gone 72 hours. Nothing in this house has missed a beat.
Right. I do the same thing. And if I have to be gone, clothes are laid out,
Dear
meals
Jesus.
are prepped. It's
all of it.
Yep.
I mean,
it's all taken care of.
Right. I'm like, the kids have to be this place at this time. Here are the neighbors' phone numbers in case anything happens. Here's a copy of their insurance, like down to the details. Like I couldn't just up and leave. I mean, I'm sure they could figure it out, right? But something would be dropped.
Well, and luckily mine are now at the ages where they can tell him and they will tell him.
Correct.
Well, that's not how mommy does it.
Right. And he's like, yeah, but I'm your dad. Like,
well, but we don't have to do it mommy's way. Mommy's not here. And they're like, yeah, but that's how we always do it. I
always have my grilled cheese in triangles. That's the only way I can eat it.
So much the truth. So maybe now that we're 15 minutes in, we can introduce you.
That sounds good.
Jamia, I am so thrilled to have you on. Please introduce yourself and just share with everybody what you do. I want to hear about your podcast. I want to hear about what you and your husband have been through. And I'll start off by just saying that I so appreciate you coming on the show. My intention was not for us to talk about what's going on in our world today, but obviously it's a relevant topic that is on everybody's minds. And so that's how our conversation started, and hitting record seemed like the thing that we really needed to do, because I was loving our conversation before we hit record and even more after.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very humbled that you even invited me to be here. So I appreciate that. My name is Jamia Ponder, and I am I'm a Pisces. I like long walks on the beach. No, I'm just kidding. Actually,
I'm a Cancer, and I like long walks on the beach too.
Okay, you're right. That wasn't a joke. But I am married. My husband is Desmond. He is a recent med school graduate, and together we have 3 children. Our oldest is 12, Madison, and then we have a 7-year-old, Mackenzie. She's my little firecracker, and then Maddox is our son, and he's 6. And I am the creator of the Mrs. Beside. It's really a movement and sort of a safe space dedicated to women who are married, and basically all that it takes to keep everything in our lives together. And it's a lot to maintain. And so really it's a space that's dedicated to celebrate that, because I feel like so many times our positions can sort of be diminished, and we are so worthy of all the respect, so worthy of all of the admiration, because really we keep everything together. We are the oil that keeps this well-oiled machine kind of ticking, and everything and everybody in their right places. So it's really a space where women can feel encouraged, where they can feel seen and feel heard. Like, I knew I wasn't by myself. I knew I wasn't crazy. No, I'm not going crazy. And then to celebrate some of our other sisters who are thriving, and just some of the things that they've gone through. But like I said, my husband's a recent med school graduate, so he is a physician now. But we started med school with 3 kids. So long story short, we moved abroad. We experienced a devastating Category 5 hurricane that kicked us back to the States. And we've been, like I say, married for 9 years, but together almost 14. And of the 14, it took 9 before he started med school. And since the beginning of our relationship, he always wanted to be a physician. So it was like a lot of years of encouraging and pushing and prepping him and keeping him encouraged so that he could reach his goal. Because I didn't want him to just, like wake up and be 45 and dump our savings into a Harley and some leather chaps. Like, I just didn't want that to happen. So
just do the damn thing.
Right. Like, no, please, I want you to be fulfilled. But also when we started this, I had no idea what it would take over the last, 13 years to get us to this point. So that is a very long answer to a super short question, but that is who I am, and that is where we are today.
I love it. And I know that you've talk about what is the Mrs. Beside. I love the way I know more about this than some might, and I hope that we get this out when your podcast launches. But I want to share how you put the Mrs. Beside is that you are standing beside your husband and through all of this and your journey. And can you share more about what that means to you and to this movement?
Yeah. So, I know we've all heard the saying, there's behind every great man, there's a great woman, but really we are beside, and often we run ahead, of our husbands in terms of taking care of things and make preparations for things. And so I really wanted to make a stance and, really sure up our equality in this position of marriage. Like, I think sometimes people sort of shy away from the term wife, but it is what it is, right? You are married and thus you're a wife, but really celebrating that position. Like, we stand beside our husbands, and really hold them up in those times that sometimes they're not even sure what the freak they want to do. Or maybe they're sure of what they want to do, but it requires a lot out of you. And sometimes we don't know, I didn't know for sure, all that it would take to sort of maintain and to get to any level of success, or however you benchmark that. But really, this is the space to celebrate that and to celebrate women and wives who have made and are making those strides to keep their families together, to keep them moving forward, to keep their husbands encouraged, to keep them encouraged to exercise, drink water, not smoke crack. I mean, all of the things that is really
I don't know if I've ever had to do that one. I'll be honest with you.
It just is what it is. But all of the things, like, you still gotta take care of you, really. Because if you don't you're going to do it the best, right? Our husbands sometimes don't really think about it. Even now, there are times where my husband would be like, okay, what do you want to do for your birthday? And I'm like, fool, we've been together how many years? You don't know what I like to do. But you're going to be the best person, and you're going to be the best advocate for you. So really finding your voice again, finding where your passion is going to lie, and reigniting that, because in that space is where you're going to find your happiness, is where you're going to find your fulfillment. So really putting us back on our to-do list.
So how do you do that? How are you with 3 kids, a husband who's just finished med school, and
Mhm.
this obviously is nowhere near the end of his long hours.
Oh, no.
I've watched enough Grey's Anatomy and ER to know this is just the beginning.
Yeah, girl. So when we were in med school, when we lived abroad, I actually like to sing recreationally. And so I joined a band on the island, and I kept a babysitter on speed dial. One of the other spouses, she would babysit for us. And personally, I like to get my nails done. And so I will find time. If you have children, get yourself a babysitter and budget for those things that you like to do. Even if it's just to freaking go to Target and walk the aisles, or sometimes there's been times, I hope Desmond's not listening, that I would just sit in my car. Okay. I would be like, I'm going to go run an errand. I would run the errand and just be sitting in my car because I just need a break. I just need some space. I need some air, some time, but really finding those things that you like to do and then figuring out how you make that happen. You figure out how you make everything else happen for everybody else. You need to figure out how you can make that happen for you. And there is a way, right? I mean, outside of like, if you just want to go to outer space or something like that. But even that, you
That's
figure
becoming
out
possible too.
yeah, you can figure out, you have to prioritize it. And maybe you can't do it all. Figure out the things that you're okay with not doing. Like, I don't necessarily wash and fold all the clothes because 1, I don't really care to do that. And then 2, it doesn't bother me. If they're clean and they sit in a pile, I'm actually okay with that. But it bothers him, so he'll fold the clothes up. So figuring out where are your things that you can sort of let go. All the dishes don't have to be done at the end of the night. The floor doesn't have to be steam mopped. What are your non-negotiables? And then what are the things that you like to do, and figuring out how you can fit those in. I know COVID has brought a new layer of complexity, but maybe it's sequestering yourself in your bedroom and having a Zoom cocktail with a girlfriend. You make that happen, or get into some counsel. I started going to counseling virtually because I realized I needed to work on me. I had some things that were off balance in my life. And so I needed to talk about that. And I can't always talk about all of those things with my husband because he's sort of got a vested interest, right? Mm-hmm. So I needed a third party to really help me sort through some of those things that's going to make me a better person, and then a better wife, and then a better mom, and a better friend. And, the domino effect is endless. So
I admit that I'm not one who's good at prioritizing myself. I used to, before kids, I got my nails done every 3 weeks. I can't tell you the last time I got mine done. Mm-hmm. But you're right in taking the moments that you can. I found that since I do my podcast in my walk-in closet, sometimes they somehow go a little bit longer and nobody's there. So that's my little secret. Hopefully Ted isn't listening to this one. I think he's a few episodes behind anyway. But I find myself doing that. And I also find, for me, I've been doing a lot of interviews lately and mm-hmm. listening to and conversing with other women. And a lot of them I don't even know. Like yesterday, I did one where we were literally talking for the first time ever. We just knew each other on social media. And that's almost like a form of therapy to me.
Yeah.
And because everyone has these expertise, whether it's, mindset stuff or business or, being a mom, and just hearing that you're not alone and, there are different ways that you can deal with it. This is like therapy to me, sort of. So.
Mm-hmm. And even listening to other podcasts and stuff. I mean, taking 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I think moreover, Michelle is really communicating that too, because, and it's not selfish to communicate that to your spouse, like, hey, I need X. If it's, mm-hmm. I need an hour in the morning, or I need an hour in the evening, or you need 30 minutes, whatever that looks like, you need to put the kids to bed, or, whatever that looks like, do that. Because, and pencil that in, just like you would pencil in a doctor's appointment. Like you said, you do your interviews and stuff like that, and you have your calendar set. Put those things back on your calendar, because it's good for your mental health. Even if it's sitting down and listening to your favorite podcast or watching your favorite TV show in the evening, uninterrupted.
Oh,
okay?
yes.
Like,
My
this
kids go
is
to bed
my
at
time.
7, and Sundays is 90 Day Fiance, and other days of the week it's Real Housewives.
Right. Like something where
Yeah.
you can unplug and just unwind for a little bit. Sometimes I even use my grocery store trips. Like those can even be therapeutic for me because I don't take the kids purposely.
I don't
Um,
take them now. So that's been very different for me because usually
mm-mm.
they will come with me. But for the last 3 months, I am the one who goes to the grocery store and to Costco. And it's different when you don't have to look around to, I'm short, I'm 5'4", not even. And I can't even see over them in the cart. So being able to push the cart freely and get whatever I want. Nobody's saying, I want to see the toys. I want to see the clothes. I
Mhm.
get it done a lot faster, which is kind of counterintuitive what we want to happen with alone time. But
But it
yeah,
works.
it's definitely different.
It works. And I
Hmm.
think too, ebbing and flowing with where you are in life. Like I can do more things now than I could when my kids were younger. So when I had my youngest two are 17 months apart. So I was working from home. I had a kindergartner, I had a 17-month-old and a newborn, and my husband was working nights. I was literally out of my mind, outside of my head, like not getting any sleep, working full time, getting my oldest daughter, she was 5, getting her on the bus, coming back home and having 2 babies at home and responsible for a full-time job while my husband slept during the day. I was not okay. Okay. Not
I
okay.
hear you. Mine are 12 months apart, 12 months and 3 weeks.
Right.
And I worked full time. I had a corporate job up until, 2 years ago. And I had them both at home with me too. So I get it. It's crazy.
And it's a lot, right? But you feel like from then to now, there is a stark difference. The needs don't necessarily diminish, but they look a little bit different when they're 5 and 4 versus, a newborn and 1 year old. So it's
Yeah.
like being okay with where you are in life, knowing that it's not permanent. It's just a temporary solution, but within that, finding that silver lining of, how can I still care for myself? And communicating whatever it is that I need. Cause there's, without a break, there's a breaking point and you don't want to hit that breaking point. It's not
I
pretty.
love that. That's going to be one of your quotes for this. I
That-
love that.
yeah. Well, it's
Uh,
true. It's
yeah.
true. It'll happen. So
Yeah, it will. And when you say that you look at the differences in their ages and how things change, I couldn't have done a podcast when they were babies.
oh
Like
no.
that it just wouldn't have worked. And
Mm-mm.
it's something that I like to tell all moms that are listening is that, you can start a business when they're really young and you just scale it differently and however you want until they go to
Right.
school because
Right.
things change and you can evolve as they evolve. Although I don't know if we're starting kindergarten in the fall right now.
That part.
And if we do, is he actually going to leave the house?
Probably not. But I
Yeah.
digress. It's not don't hang your hat on that. They'll go back to school eventually. It will look a little bit different. But the reality is, to your point, things will get better. It will ease up on one side of things. And so there is a light at the end if you are feeling overwhelmed, but you got to find somewhere that, you got to find a starting point. I used to complain a lot because I'd be like, oh, you don't prioritize me. And really, you have to make a practice of these things. It doesn't just automatically happen. You can't say, oh, well, when this happens, I'll do it. Or when this happens, I'll do it. No, if you don't make a practice out of prioritizing yourself, it will not happen. There will always be something else to take up that time unless you plan for it, unless you put yourself back on that to-do list. You got to pencil yourself in because otherwise it's not just going to magically manifest. It just doesn't happen that way. So
I'm going to put you on the spot with this movement. Are you coaching women to do this?
am I coaching women to do what? To
Prioritize
themselves?
themselves, to make these changes? Because
I
I kind of think
highly
you
encourage
should.
it. Yeah, I highly encourage it. Just to take it from me. Because I literally, Michelle, I'm going to be very transparent with you. I had like a meltdown, a major, major meltdown, like crying. So I was like, nobody in this house cares about me. You guys don't care. You guys don't care. You just take. Everyone's okay as long as mom is giving, right? You'll take. And I don't get anything in return. And the reality is, I wasn't giving myself that. I wasn't requesting that, nor was I demanding that from them. They were taking my lead.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say they were taking my lead, I mean that I was doing that. I was setting up a culture where they didn't have to think about anything. They didn't have to do anything because I would just take care of it. Well, why would you do it if someone else is just taking care of it? So I had to make the change. And I had, like, at the end of the night now, I say, okay, mom's done. And when I say mom's done, that means unless, your head has rolled down the hallway or there's blood or something, I'm done for the evening. No more requests, no more, outside of something, the outlying things. But like, I'm done for the evening. I'm shutting down because I need this time. And now my kids know what that means. But it took me getting to a breaking point where I'm like a hot mess because nobody was giving back to me.
Right.
But I wasn't requesting it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just doing it. And everybody was okay with me doing it until I fell
You
apart.
were no longer okay. Mm-hmm.
Correct. And what good am I if I can't pour from an empty cup? And so I had to learn how to fill my own cup. And I know that when I take those structured breaks, I feel better. Like I'm re-energized. I can come back and I'm like, okay, I can do it.
But will you coach people one-on-one? That's what I'm getting at.
Oh, I will. If you're okay having the hard conversations, I'm not going to be like, oh, sweetie, it's okay. You'll get there. Like, no, what are you doing? What do you like to do? What are you going to do? What are we going to do? Let's get together. If you want that kind of one-on-one coaching, I will absolutely do that for you. But you got to be ready to make those changes.
Oh, ladies out there, this sounds like an opportunity. I think you're amazing. I love listening to you. And I'll be honest with you. I have a VA who helps me with show notes, and she listened to your show before I did. And she came back like halfway through. She goes, oh my gosh, I love this woman. This is the best podcast ever. And I was like, well, even though I just paid you to listen to this, I'm going to listen to it myself. And so I binged it all. I'm like, yeah, I'm paying her to, help me out here, but I'm going to listen to everything too.
That is so funny. No, literally, I was like stunned because I was sitting at the table and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, the lady who's helping with my show notes, her name is Michelle. And my husband's looking at me like, okay. Like, I'm literally freaking out. And he's like, that's nice. Like, okay, forget it. Forget it.
Sometimes they don't get it.
It's fine. I was like, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'll have my own moment. It's fine. Don't worry. But yeah.
No, I love it. And Daniel too. Everybody on the show knows who Daniel is because he's been a guest as well. He was like, I really hope you like Jamia because I like her.
Daniel's hilarious. He emailed me and he was like, I'm literally LOLing, like laughing out loud at your podcast. And I was like, okay, I'm glad that it was funny to you. But that's real life. And I really wish I was making it up, but I'm not. Like, that stuff actually happened.
That's the best though, when it is real life, and these are real life. We talked about content earlier, and maybe we can touch back on that. And for me, it's like, I want to share what real life is on the podcast. I don't want to fake anything. And I'm as transparent and as candid as I possibly can be, whether it's a solo or, I'm interviewing someone. I'm like, well, here's my story. And if it's business related, I'm like, great. Can you coach me while you're on the call with me? Tell me what I can do. I think it should be. And, the part that we didn't record when we started this was we were talking about my content on the podcast during this time while we're seeing protests going, and racism is the topic that is at hand.
Yeah.
And do you talk about it if it's not something that you would normally talk about it per se? And I loved what you shared. Can you share it again? I don't know if you can remember what you said, but you were talking about how the content should be for other people and helping them if they don't know where to start, or, share how I share my beliefs with that.
Yeah. So, really, as I started to research you before we considered sort of entering into the whole show notes piece, when I was researching you, I looked at your website and the content that you produce, and it felt very much coach-like too. And I look at you like a coach and a mentor, but just about how people can better build their brands and build their businesses and sort of establish themselves consistency wise and all of that kind of thing. But I don't feel like necessarily, and I shared this with you earlier, that you have to necessarily change all of your content per se, but you can state where you are and the great strides you talked about, the things that you were doing with your own children and how you were framing those conversations with your children. And that's really where it starts. And so my recommendation sort of was that you could even, if you read a good book, a good race conscious book, something that you felt like was eye opening, or another article that you read, that you felt was very enlightening on how people can sort of state their stance in this, saying, maybe it's not maybe, but saying that it's not okay. But you don't have to necessarily change the way that you put out all of your material, but you can recommend books that people can read, and you can share other articles and even share things that you are personally doing that other people could adopt and adapt in their own lives. And just how things have changed for you, or how your eyes have been opened in different regards. So sharing that material, even in a quick blog write-up, other people that they could follow, that they could find good information on. You might not be the benchmark for understanding where, say, for instance, me, a Black woman in America, where I would stand and what my vantage point would be, but maybe you've seen an article that speaks very highly to that, or how, as a white ally, how you could be helpful in times like these. So that was sort of my recommendation to how you can integrate those pieces, but not necessarily change the way that your platform is being run.
I so appreciate that. And I appreciate you. I'm so grateful and thankful that our paths have crossed and that we get to not just work together, but, have these conversations and build a relationship on it. I'm so excited to have you in my life.
Yay, same.
Can you please share with everyone where they can find you and soon where they can hear you?
Yes. So you can go to my website. It's www.themrsbeside, THEMRSBESID.com. That is my website. You can read all about me. You can drop me a line. You can read my blog posts, and soon my podcast will also be linked to my website. And I'm also on Instagram at the Mrs. Beside the MD. That's where you can find me. And I'm also on Facebook. I have the Mrs. Beside Facebook page, and you're welcome to follow me there. So all of my content will be linked. I also have a YouTube page that will have my podcast soon on it. And so I will post all of that and blast it all out as soon as it's up and live. There's a little process there with getting it live with Apple, but as soon as it is, I will be sharing my life with you guys. And I hope that, if even one person finds it valuable, then I've done what I set out to do.
Well, you've already got 3 on your team who feel that way. So you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Friends, thank you so much for joining me today. And always, I pray that our world sees change soon and that we can all recognize and appreciate each other as human beings who deserve to be treated equally and with love and respect. We are defining our futures, and this is a part that none of us should be skipping. Until next week, stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and love one another.